Hello, my name is Bobby Ampazon. I'm the Communications Associate for the Council on Food, Agricultural, and Resource Economics. We are pleased to have you join us today for a timely and delicious topic, local foods procurement, a catalyst for small farm economics. Our presenters today are from Colorado State University and the USDA. Dawn Philmeny is a professor and extension specialist at Colorado State University. She specializes in economic development related to innovative and value-added food markets, as well as food market analysis and consumer behavior. She's also currently president-elect of the Agricultural and Applied Economics Association. Becca Jablonski is an assistant professor and food systems extension economist. She evaluates farm and ranch profitability and non-commodity market sales, such as local food markets, and assessing the community economic impacts of food system policies and direction. Jeff O'Hara is a USDA economist. He studies food systems. His specific interests are to research and apply economic concepts that foster community development and reward business practices that are environmentally sustainable. Before we start, we just want to point out CFAIR is online at cfair.org. We are a nonprofit, and the scope of CFAIR's activities encompass a broad range of subjects that the agricultural and applied economics profession covers. You can reach us through Facebook and Twitter or email us at information@cfair.org. We just want to point out that you could put questions to one or all of our speakers by typing it into the box in the control display. It's got the little drop-down arrow, and sending it to the organizer. We will broadcast your question. We will not broadcast your name or organization, just the question. I'll hand the webinar now over to Jeff, who will start us off.
Thank you, Bobby, and thanks for having me here. My name is Jeff O'Hara. I'm an economist at USDA. I'm just going to really spend a few minutes describing what the USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service does to support the local food sector. So we do two main things. Go to the next slide, please. We administer some key grant programs, including the Farmers Market Promotion Program, the Local Food Promotion Program. There's a new Farm Bill program called the Regional Partnerships Program, which will be coming out with an RFA sometime in the coming months. And we also have a Technical Assistance Division, which is the Marketing Services Division, which is where I work. We're a small division, but we really have some key ways and unique ways in which we support local food practitioners. We maintain local food directories. We have a farmers market directory of, over 8,000 farmers markets listed in the United States. It's a directory that's commonly used to establish the counts of the number of farmers markets. We also have directories for other direct marketing businesses. We do a lot of outreach and technical assistance to our active grantees, Farmers Market Promotion Program and Local Food Promotion Program grantees. Really, the idea that we're trying to work with them on is, if you receive a USDA grant, we're going to work with you to try to make your grant as successful as possible after you get the award. We are really doing a lot to collect and analyze market data. The local food sector, data is not as widespread as it is in conventional commodity agricultural markets. There aren't futures exchanges for local food products. So we've really been working and it helped lead to some big improvements in the way local food data is collected in the last 10 years at USDA. We have an architect on staff, and we're hoping to hire a second architect. So for facilities that need help with designs, it's a free service we offer to the sector. They help draw blueprints. And we also play a role for convening in the sector. And I'll talk about that in the next slide, please. In 2018 and 2019, we've hosted the National Direct Agricultural Marketing Summit. In 2018, it was here in DC. 2019, it was in Chicago. We've established some public-private partnerships. In 2019, we worked with Farm Credit Council, Farmers Market Coalition, Illinois Farm Bureau, Agricultural Marketing Resource Center at Iowa State, and Market Maker at putting on a convening. We work with our active grantees to go to the conference for technical assistance workshops. So in 2018, we had over 400 people, and in 2019, we had over 300 people. So they've been pretty successful events, and we're going to continue to pursue opportunities like that in the future. We've also really gotten better. We've helped the National Agricultural Statistics Service, which is USDA's agency which does farm surveys. Helped work with them at better capturing local food data. So here's what we see in 2015. Local food sales were approximately $9 billion in the United States. And in 2017, farm sales were approximately $12 billion. And the red part of that graph represents direct farm sales that they make to retailers like supermarkets and grocery stores and to distributors that market locally branded food products. Whereas the blue part of the bar chart represents sales at farmers markets, on-farm stores, community-supported agriculture programs, and other ways in which farms make sales directly to consumers. One of the things we're really trying to promote, we're working with the National Agricultural Statistics Service at developing a farmers market manager survey that is going to go into the field next year in 2020. A key thing that we're trying to get the word out is to make sure farmers markets across the country have their farmers markets registered in our directory. And the reason that's important is because our directory is going to serve as the basis for NASS to administer the survey. So in order for farmers markets to, to ensure, increase the probability that farmers markets are going to be counted and we're going to understand the sector better, we're going to use our directory as a basis for trying to conduct outreach to the farmers market manager sector. This is really going to give us a lot of insight into how farmers market managers are performing, and this will help us improve the effectiveness and impact of the Farmers Market Promotion Program grant program. And I think you'll hear more about this website, but AMS has contributed, definitely put a lot of projects and technical assistance resources on localfoodeconomics.com. It's a great website. It's served as for something called the Economic Impact Toolkit, which Don and Becca will describe. It's a resource to help communities measure the economic impact of local food system projects. We've also put the convenings for our 2018 and 2019 summits on this website. And I know Don and Becca have put some farm to school resources up there, as well as financial profitability benchmarks. So it's a great place, and we're going to continue to add resources to it and support it going forward. So with that, I believe that's my last slide. I'm going to turn it over to Don and Becca.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks so much to Bobby and Karen for organizing this and to CFAIR generally. We are going to present a number of different pieces of information from a lot of different research projects. Most of them have been funded by the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture and the USDA Ag Marketing Service. And we've tried to highlight that, but just our thanks to our funders. So this sign and this image should be familiar to most of you on this call. Increasingly, we are seeing in places like grocery stores or restaurants information about locally grown and promoting locally grown. Indeed, every state in the United States has some type of state branding program. And increasingly, we see that those efforts are coupled with other types of federal or state or local subsidies to support local buying. And many of these efforts have a dual goal of both increasing the amount of fruits and vegetables or other healthy foods that consumers are going to purchase, especially low-income consumers, as well as to create new market opportunities for farmers and ranchers. And just to give a couple quick examples that may be familiar to many of you, we've seen that the USDA has made a number of investments in local and regional food systems, primarily since 2008, although a little bit before then, and that each subsequent farm bill has really increased the amounts of funding available, and that the funding to support these local and regional food system initiatives is really throughout many of the titles in the Farm Bill now, right? This isn't just in the rural title, right? It's really, we see it in a lot of different places and to support a lot of different objectives. And so here you can see some of the grant dollars and number of grants that have gone to 4 selected USDA agencies. In addition to federal support, as I mentioned at the state level, we've seen a proliferation in the state branding programs. We've seen that there are now over 300 active food policy councils throughout North America. And actually, we had some students go and look and see which of those food policy councils have created food plans. And there's 52 of these councils that have actually created food plans between 2010 and 2017. And we wanted to highlight this because increasingly one of the things that these food policy councils are interested in is trying to leverage municipal procurement to support those goals of creating new markets or value-added markets for farmers and ranchers of all scales and commodities, and also in trying to promote healthy eating and active living and some of those goals, especially to support low-income consumers. And so here's some examples of the food plans and the food policy councils that have tried to implement some of the municipal procurement goals. All of this information is put together by the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future, and there's lots more great detail available on their website if you're interested in learning more. As one of the examples about leveraging local procurement, farm to school may be actually the largest example. We have over 100,000 schools across the U.S. that include over 30 million students. The National School Lunch Program represents about $13 billion in expenditure. And so what we've seen is proliferation in the number of these kinds of policies that are actually trying to use and leverage that type of local procurement to support expanded markets for farmers and ranchers and get healthier food into schools. And so just as a more localized example of how this kind of happens and of the kind of buying power we're talking about, not just within schools, but in some of the other institutional purchasers, you can see that this is some work that the City and County of Denver have been doing through their food plan to try to document both the total spending from these institutional purchasers as well as the amount that's local. And actually, we think that there's actually significantly more than the $6 million a year. And so much of what we've been trying to do at Colorado State University is to understand, is there evidence that farmers and ranchers, and especially small scale and beginning farmers and ranchers, win from these local food procurement strategies?
Thank you, Becca. And we do want to encourage everyone, again, we're going through a lot of material pretty quickly. This is Don Somany who's going to turn over to this part. So we did that partly because we wanted to give you highlights of all the things that were available for you to learn more from. So please do ask questions if you need clarification. As Becca said, one of the things we're most focused on and our funders were most focused on is local foods were often framed as something that would help support our farm economy, but we had really not done any evaluation yet, except for that very broad characterization like the graphic shows here, that we knew farmers were not getting the share of food dollars that some people feel like they should have given their role in the food system. But as we all know, there's a lot to be done to run a farm and to market these products. So we wanted to take a closer look at if, after all the additional cost and business strategy that these farmers need to use to actually start doing more of their marketing and sales directly, are they still really winning on the bottom line by participating in these markets? The first way we decided to look at this, and this looks quite busy, but it really boils down to the ag of the middle idea of we have very different models that people can use to be in agriculture. And commodity on the bottom right side had become a fairly dominant model in this country, and it's still a very, very important part of our food supply chain. But we'd increasingly seen people move to those direct markets up in the upper left-hand corner, which had lots of wins in terms of the share of food dollars that farmers got to take home, but were sometimes small enough amounts of sales that we still didn't see farmers always able to be viable. So we took this schematic made by the Ag of the Middle research group and added a few more dimensions to it, which you'll see in the outside circle, of all the different models that we do know are in operations out there. And this goes back to what Jeff said about the new ways we're also trying to collect data so we can track how farmers participating in these models are doing. But it all boils down to what that initial graphic of who gets the food dollar. And on the bottom, we see the model that some people thought was a challenge for the farm economy, which is too little of that food dollar was making it back to farms. Well, as we saw in the last schematic, we've come up with models where a higher share of that food dollar might be retained by the farms. And that is a win from first glance. But we also know it's great because it tends to give those farms more managerial control and an ability to leverage any value they can create by making a higher quality product or better customer service. But there's also the trade-off we see here that often those markets don't allow for the volume of sales that you need to be commercially viable. So with that, we put together a series of what we call financial benchmarks, which is just jargon for the fact that we try to put together the numbers that represent what these business models look like, the direct market business models of farmers markets, CSAs, but also those working through intermediated markets like selling to schools or through food hubs. And so at that local food economics website that has already been mentioned, we have a series of fact sheets you can look at that boil that information down, but we wanted to hit the highlights today. So the first thing we did is, because we knew this was so important to the ag of the middle story, we have almost all of our results divided by the scale of farms, because one of the challenges with the commodity model that had become strongly defining of this sector was it was very hard for smaller and mid-sized operations to compete. So one of the reasons we've seen people switching to direct and intermediated markets is perhaps that there is more viability at the small level scales. But the first thing we wanted to show that's interesting to us is how those business operations work. And particularly, we want to draw your eyes to the orange line that is tall throughout the schematics, but that is the amount being spent on labor. And the reason that is important is we do believe these markets are very much driven by very customer-driven, customer service business models, and that is showing up in the amount of expenditures that are being spent on labor by these farm operations. That's not only important because it tells us it's a different business model, but as we'll talk about later when we talk about benefits and spillovers to the communities and economies these farmers operate in, those additional money spent on labor also may have benefits to the workers and the households in those communities where the farms operate. And what was really interesting to us, I guess I should have brought that up here as well, is usually when you see farms getting larger in the U.S. economy, they're spending less on labor. They're spending more on capital and purchased inputs. We saw the exact opposite pattern here, and as you see by that orange bar, where we were seeing farms actually invest more in that labor, and some of these are high-quality jobs similar to brokers and distributors we see in the mainline economy. So for the rest of our schematics that we're going to look at for these benchmarks, we decided to actually not just divide always by scale, but also divide by the profitability of these farms. So there were some questions about, can you have viable farms operating in this space? So instead of treating any one farm as an average farm, we divided it by how well they're competing, and the measure we just chose to use for that is return on assets, which is the net income they bring home at the end of the year after they've paid off their costs, divided by the amount they have invested in their farm, whether it's in land or machinery or a packing shed. But we chose that because we know a lot of farmers in this space are actually being very, very strategic and not buying as many assets and leasing them or finding ways to share them as a way to stay competitive. So in this graphic, and there's a lot of information here again, you'll see from left to right in any one of these charts that we go from quartile 1, which is the lower performing farms, to quartile 4, which is the higher performing farms. And what you'll see is that this is also divided by scale, just like we had in the labor chart. But we do have a lot of farms that are not viable. Those orange and blue lines are the bad news of this story, that there are a lot of farms who are not finding yet a way to make money, but perhaps those are also beginning farms where most beginning businesses don't make money. The better news is that we have at least half of our farms breaking even or making profits regardless of the scale. And so the two real highlights I want to hit here are, even at the very smallest scales of farms, so those people we want to maybe have the opportunity to get a step or a foothold into agriculture, if they operate in these markets, over half of them are finding a way to be economically viable. And the second highlight I want to hit is the height of those bars. The people who are doing the best in the sector are getting very, very good returns in what's usually considered in agriculture a low returns or low margins industry. If we divide those exact same sets of producers by, instead of their scale, but instead by where they sell, we find a very similar thing. About the top half, you can barely see the third quartile because it's just breaking even. About the top half of producers are breaking even or are quite profitable, although we still have half of our farmers struggling to get a foothold. But again, what we see here is that those operating in intermediated markets, those are the farm to school or farm to restaurant or food hub accounts, are doing a bit better. And we imagine that is because of the volume of sales they're able to actually secure through those markets, and that they're perhaps a little bit less labor intensive. So our key takeaways again are that one of the upsides of local food system participants is that they can be profitable at any scale, but that scale may matter in terms of what are the appropriate marketing strategies for them. So we still have some technical assistance and education to do about directing those producers into where they belong at different stages of their operations, but that really our long-term goal is to continue to build these strong intermediated market channels, because it looks like there's a correlation with those farmers who are able to access those intermediated sales having higher profitability. The one last measure we wanted to look at, because it's kind of a measure of efficiency, is asset turnover. And so asset turnover says for the amount of dollars a producer's puts into owning their land, their trucks, their packing sheds, how much sales can they get from that? So the higher number, the better. And again, what we see is, not surprisingly, those of higher scale are doing better and being efficient in using their assets. Although, again, our top quartile 4 in all of those categories and all those scales is that they're actually finding a way to be quite efficient in using their assets to convert them to sales. So another way as economists tend to look at this is what we call an efficiency frontier. And the clever trick that we do is we pick out the very best producers in our sample. So we had thousands of producers to choose from, and we look at who's doing the very best. And we kind of take that as a signal. Those who are making the best profits are an indicator of how well you could do in this sector given the market conditions and prices and so forth. And we create this profit efficiency frontier. And then what we do is we go back with all the other producers in the sample and we look at how underperforming they are. And that isn't meant to sound too judgmental, but it's meant to say how much better could they do if they were making the right business choices and strategies. And our key takeaways from the analysis we did on that, and there's a whole article you can see referenced here, is that we do have a lot of producers in the space who could increase their profitability and efficiency if they were making investments in the right places. That is good news for the fact that we still do have these really good ag marketing service grant programs that allow producers to explore those exact changes they need to make. But that scale has the largest impact on financial efficiency. So even though direct markets might be a nice gateway for smaller producers into the marketplace, we always should have our eye on the prize that we may need to find ways for them to scale up. And that it's really about them controlling their variable expenses like labor and input costs and packaging that is paramount to them being efficient more than their fixed expenses. But we did find good news that there are efficient producers in all of the marketing channel choices. So even though we think intermediated is a pathway to profitability, we know other producers can make that. And that's a nice segue into the project that Becca's going to talk about now, about how we help producers understand the appropriate market channels.
Yeah, so given the national data analysis that we were able to do and seeing that there are differences in performance based on market channel selection, we wanted to do a deeper dive into more nuanced responses and results among those market channels, so within direct-to-consumer and within intermediated markets. So what we did is we borrowed a methodology that was developed by our friends at Cornell University, by Matt LaRue and Todd Schmidt, called a market channel assessment. And here what we do is evaluate the market opportunities. We ask questions around sales volume, labor requirements, producers' perception of risk. We also ask questions around lifestyle preferences, right? Because of course, if you have producers that don't want to sell at a farmer's market, even if they have access to a great farmer's market, it's probably not a good recommendation. And this work was supported by a FSMIP grant with the USDA Ag Marketing Services. So we sent grad students into the field to go and collect data. They're collecting data from producers during a typical peak week. So of course, this is not popular with producers, and it's a hard sell because they are working really hard during that peak week. And I should mention also, we only did these market channel assessments with specialty crop producers that we hope to expand it in future years. And so we have grad students who are there at the farm and helping producers to track information, especially on sales, mileage, and most importantly on labor utilization. We use labor, we focus on labor because, as you saw from the national data analysis that Dawn presented, we find that labor is the largest marketing expense and it's also a consistent unit and format, right? And so it works well. So what we do ahead of time is do a pre-interview with producers. We try to ask information about where they're selling products and who's actually working at the operation. And so we try to get these labor logs populated with as much information as possible in advance to reduce producer response burden. And then we give them, hundreds of these to fill out. Just to mention that even though we did more of the market channel assessments with smaller scale producers, we also did some of these with large specialty crop producers who often had H2A labor crews. And to the extent that they had an H2A crew, we would have the crew manager fill this out on behalf of all of the H2A labor. So just to quickly highlight what we find, one is that we do find a significant heterogeneity in performance across market channel. So this is looking at the marketing profit margin percentile for intermediated channels specifically. On the far left, you're looking at all of the intermediated channels, so that's 101 observations. And then we have that information split out into distributor, grocer, restaurant sales, and then other. And just to say other includes things like farm to school. Actually, that's one of the dominant markets in the other. Because we do not collect complete variable expense information here, we call this a marketing profit margin, because really what we're doing is taking the gross sales for that channel, we're subtracting marketing labor costs and travel costs and dividing it by gross sales. So what you can see, the yellow square there represents the top 75th percentile of performers, the green is the bottom 25th percentile, and the orange is the median. And so, for example, you can see things like overall, our restaurants are our lowest performing intermediated channel, right? Because we have not included complete variable expenses, the folks that have a marketing profit margin of 9.21%, for example, are likely losing money, right? And so what we're able to do with some of this, I'm just going to skip ahead here. This is some of the information that Cornell actually collected, and Todd Schmidt and some others and I worked on a USDA AFRI grant a number of years ago where we were looking at financial performance for farms that sell through the green markets, which is the largest network of farmers markets in the country, perhaps the world, operated by Grow NYC. And so one of the things we can do here, if you focus on those orange lines that are with farmers markets, is that we can take these marketing profit margins and then we can actually use information from a particular producer to benchmark how they're performing relative to the median or top 75th percentile. And so we can then say things like, for the top 75th percentile, they're finding ways to be more efficient with their labor. For example, maybe they have a CSA pickup at the farmer's market. CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. And so we can look at things like that and then make recommendations. If you're interested in learning more about our market channel assessments, they're available on our website, foodsystems.colostate.edu.
Thank you, Becca. And again, always feel free to ask questions because we know we're going through a lot. But again, our goal with this webinar is to show all the work that is being done across the country and know that all of this is shareable as well. So if you know there are groups that could benefit from using some of these tools, there's nothing proprietary about them, and we really want people to actually be able to use them to benefit their own programming. So one example we wanted to give about how we're using this to inform communities is we're fortunate here in Colorado to have a beginning farmer program we call the Building Farmers Program. And for a long time, we have been teaching farmers, we're over actually 500 now, as of this year, about how to build a business plan in this space. And for a great number of the years, and it's been operating for 12 years, we had to kind of go by the anecdotes and stories of producers who were already successful in the space. But for the first time with these kind of studies that are coming out, we can actually verify and give more confidence to people that there are pathways and business models that are working to be profitable. So a lot of those beginning farmers did participate in this market channel assessment that Becca mentioned, and these are the kind of quotes that we give, because in addition, like she said, in addition to doing this analysis to move the field forward, we also provided those consulting services to them where they got some individual consulting about what their numbers meant for them. And so we know that people were actually out there operationally changing their business plan or refining it based on some of this analysis. So that speaks to us that there is room for more of this type of technical assistance and applied research to be done. And in fact, another partner we haven't probably mentioned strongly enough, except they did support this in the Northeast, is Farm Credit, because they are also looking for ways to score loans because they have far more loans coming in their door that are operational monies rather than asset purchasing monies, because this model is so, local food model is so much more based on it. So the other thing we really try to do to connect this research to communities is, with the support and actually the vision and foresight of the Ag Marketing Service, we put together a toolkit to guide people throughout the country who are putting together these food policy councils mentioned earlier, to put together food plans about how you'd come up with both a plan for what your community really wanted to happen in local food systems, but then some ways to evaluate and assess the economic impact specifically of those. And so this toolkit has been out since about 2016, as you see. And we were really lucky. We did one really big training in the fall of 2016 at the food distribution meetings in New Orleans. And we were fortunate because we had funding to actually get scholarships provided to 34 different communities, including a lot of socially disadvantaged, to get to that training. But in addition to that rollout training, we've done over 30 trainings of over 2,200 people with this toolkit. And again, it was meant to kind of get on the ground a way for communities to think about these local marketing farms, but more importantly, these food hubs and farmers markets and all these other local marketing assets we're talking about, all in the same room to talk about how they move the system in their place forward. And there's such a place-based aspect to that. We knew we needed to use a train-the-trainer model where we told people how to do the principles of it, but we knew they knew their communities to take this back and do it well. And again, we were lucky that we got to provide scholarships, so we had a very diverse set of people in those trainings. At the one in New Orleans, we had 2/3 that were female and half that were at minority-serving institutions. And then we were lucky enough to have so many of those communities go out and actually put this toolkit into play that we could compile enough case studies to do a whole issue of the Journal of Ag, Food Systems, and Community Development that you see featured here, that shows how different communities put that toolkit into play to put their communities onto a better pathway to successfully coordinating their food systems activities, including direct market. So another thing that we made available through that, because a lot of these teams lacked the expertise to do economic impact assessments, although everybody who works with the economic development community knows that they always are looking for the bottom line numbers, we made part of the training how you would actually build the numbers that you can track in your markets, either sales or investments made or new business linkages created, to estimate an impact or multiplier. And so this is a graphic of what we were trying to do. But what we realized, even with these trainings, is that very few of them would ever have a partner who is able to actually do some of the modeling and estimation that would be needed to actually get to that last step of estimating an economic impact multiplier. So what we did is we actually, using some of that national data we've been referring to this whole presentation that we have on local producers now, we developed our own local food impact calculator. And in fact, today is the rollout, the first time anyone will see that calculator 2.0. It just went through an update, and this is in the beta version. So we ask you and invite you to go test that out. But what we did is, on this website, localfoodeconomics.com, there is a button to go to this calculator. And what a project can do then, who doesn't have a person on their project with the expertise to customize it themselves, is we can give them a pretty good estimate. If they tell us their project name, they tell us the general region they're looking at, because we saw people in these trainings that represented anything from a single county to a whole state or multi-state region like the New England area. Then we ask them the types of sales that are going on in those markets. We ask them to provide their best guess about where those are, but we also have a combination for those projects that have both. And again, what is really valuable here is that because we have this great cooperative agreement with the Economic Research Service that lets us see the Ag Resource Management Survey data for now thousands of farms that operate in these, we can make really good representative models of what those businesses are doing, what they're spending their money on. And so we're only able to do this because we have both these great relationships with Ag Marketing Service and Economic Research Service, that we can provide something like this that our communities can use. But if they tell us those two answers, both what kind of geography they're operating within and what kind of sales they're doing, and the great news is the toolkit gives them more guidance on these if those questions are not resonating with them. And then if they enter the project value, which we try to give them some coaching about whether that's gross sales or it's the additional sales or it's a farmer reporting to them they're getting 25% more of their sales because they're selling to a school with a commitment to them. But we try to give them coaching both here on the calculator website, but again, try to reference the toolkit a lot too, because it has whole modules to describe that to them. But then if they put that in, this was a project we made up that was for a state that had $1 million they could report from their farmers market managers, for instance. It will tell them with the multiplier effect of how that $1 million resonates through all the businesses that do business with those farms, that it's 1.728 million. And again, if anyone's ever worked with the economic development community, these are the exact type of answers they want. And you'll notice at the bottom even we have a way that we can, taking these screenshots would not be very professional to one of those meetings. So we have a way that they can have a PDF of this exact same report sent to them. So we want everybody to know and disseminate that resource is out there for the types of communities that don't have the ability to do such analysis themselves.
And given the proliferation of investment in local and regional food system markets and developing markets or supporting infrastructure, different programming, we've also worked with the National Farm to School Network to create a toolkit that's built off of the USDA Ag Marketing Services toolkit, but it's focused on evaluating the impacts of farm to school. So we've found that that's been a useful resource. We think it's been downloaded over 4,000 times from their website, and so it seems to be useful for communities. And we have this ongoing community of practice through e-extension, the local and regional food systems. So that's what local food economics is. We've had almost 100,000 hits to the website since the launch in 2015, including 78,000 unique page views. And we encourage you, if you're working with somebody who's applying for a USDA AFRI grant, if you are thinking about applying for one yourself, this is a great way to disseminate information about your project that touches on the economics of local and regional food systems. So I really encourage you to join the listserv, join the community of practice. We really want to highlight opportunities to get involved.
And we did want to emphasize that we know we did this pretty interchangeably today, but some of the work that you saw today is focused on Colorado, particularly the market channel assessments, and the building farmer quotes. But actually the majority of this work we've done, because we've had support from the broad USDA, has been targeting at the national level. So it is representative of the whole country, not just Colorado. We're already seeing on our phones that some of you are signing up for our community of practice. So we've done our jobs here, because that's, 1 hour we can cover a lot, but really what you want to do is just get involved with the community, because there's so many clever people in our set of colleagues that are doing good things in this space, and we've all felt like we've all gotten better by seeing what each other's doing. So that's really helpful for us. So thank you for being involved today. And if you're not the direct person to have this involved, get the word out to the people you work with in your constituency and stakeholders about how they can join our team as well. Thank you.
And of course, Seafair wants to thank our presenters, Dawn Thomeni and Becca Jablonski, both food market and food systems economists at Colorado State University, and of course, Jeff O'Hara, an economist at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And we wouldn't be here doing all this if you didn't join us. So thank you, the audience. You no doubt are as passionate about the subject as we are. And so we're so happy to spend this time with you. Thank you all so much and have a great day.